This is KC Sports Tonight.
Welcome into KC Sports Tonight. Marleah Campbell digitally alongside Neal Jones. In reality, pretty far away. Neal, where are you? What are you doing?
I am at the soccer match. You know that because you told management to send me here instead of me going to training camp and then doing a story. You said, no, let's let Neal do a twofer, a double header for Neal. But I've got good news. I have a photographer. I'm actually with a photographer, although he just walked off. That's our photographer back there. Kenny Price just walked off and locked it down. So, but he set it up so that we're very near all of the Cokes and beers and bottled waters and all that stuff. And I'll tell you something, Marleah, you're famous at the station, probably famous in Kansas City for getting face painted on your live shots. I did a live shot earlier in our 4 o'clock show with Chandler Watkins, our reporter who works at night, who's covering this. And you know, I don't think you should pan over when we're in boxes, Kenny, but anyway, that's Chandler. All she's done, Marleah, reminds me a little of you. All she's done is get face painting, drink free drinks, Cokes, and talk to people. That's all she's done, similar to what you do when you and I are there. In fact, I had about a week and a half of that in Las Vegas at the Super Bowl.
A woman after my own heart. Neal, on the right, which you can't see here, the headline is Neal Jones is busy because you were also in training camp today. So we're going to get to both of these topics, but I want to start with the stadium. Women's Cup semifinals are going on right now. First game started at 5, second game with the current starts at 8 o'clock. And Neal, you and I were talking before you left today just about how significant the construction and the building of this stadium has been for women's sports, for Kansas City. I'm just wondering your thoughts on the impact this has had now that we're, a couple months into this thing being open.
Let's be clear, I don't use words like significant. What I said was, hey, this is a big deal, even around the world. Marleah, it is massive. The folks here don't want to say it, but the reality is the only reason this is in Kansas City is because of this stadium. CPKC Stadium is known not just in the Kansas City area or the region or within the NWSL. It is known around the world in terms of soccer because of what it stands for. A women's only, it's built for women to play soccer. They're not playing in a 70,000 or 78,000 seat Arrowhead Stadium where a crowd of 5,000 would look like a joke. They're not even over at the 19,000 seat stadium where they played last year at Children's Mercy Park, which is as good a soccer stadium, I think, as there is in the United States. No, they have this stadium built for them. And it is a commitment that goes beyond soccer. It's about inclusiveness, about getting people to play. When I come out here, there are always so many little girls and young women and a lot of young guys as well who are into this. They're excited about it. It's close to downtown. The parking situation needs to be taken care of, and I believe it will be by next year. This stadium, the biggest question I think this franchise is going to have moving forward if they continue to win is, do we expand it? Because we were talking about this last year. This team started playing pretty good soccer last year, and suddenly they're drawing bigger crowds at Children's Mercy than what this stadium can hold. So what are you going to do? It's built to be expanded, but do you want to expand or do you want to keep it tight where people have to buy the tickets? It's really a marvelous question mark, but I'm telling you this is a great message for the rest of the world about women's sports and women's soccer.
Yeah, you nailed it. When you talk about attendance, that conversation came up a lot too, because as we know, the NWSL Championship is coming to town in a couple months from now. The last NWSL Championship drew 25,000 fans. I believe it was in San Diego. The capacity of not Children's Mercy Park, CPKC Stadium, is 11,500. So that'll be something interesting to follow. A lot of folks are going to want to go to that game. Unfortunately, there are limited seats. Then you get into pricing, supply and demand. So that'll be interesting. Neal, I'm curious tonight, though. That is the first game. Obviously, the big event is the 8 p.m. game with the hometown team playing. What are you looking forward to most about this evening's festivities?
Well, I mean, you were nice enough to edit an interview with Coach Vlatko, who talked to the coach of KC Current, one of the most respected coaches in all of soccer. And he talked about how exciting this is for their players because they realize what it means to have 4 international teams. You got a team from Spain. The best women's side in Spain is playing in the 5 o'clock match against the best women's side from Japan. Now you've got Sporting KC Current hosting the team from South Africa. The South African women, I am told that their women's soccer, their league is not as strong, but the team they're going to play tonight is by far the best team in their league, so they realize they're going to have to bring their A game probably to be able to win. I think it's just very exciting. The winners of the matches tonight will play in the championship match Saturday night at 8 p.m. The losers will play at 5 p.m. on Saturday, and then the winner of those matches on Saturday, the championship match, will then take on the winner of a similar tournament that's going on in Louisville right now. Racing Louisville was the home team in that. They got knocked out last night in their match. So the winner of the team that comes out of here will play the teams that comes out of Louisville, and they'll do that sometime January or February of next year. But the point is, these matches are being carried around the world on cable. On Paramount, obviously CBS Paramount has the rights here. So this is a big thing to sell women's soccer and to sell Kansas City to not just the nation, but the entire world.
Yeah, you mentioned selling Kansas City. One of my favorite answers from the press conference earlier this week, I was listening to it today, was Lola Bonta was asked, what does it mean to have all of these different countries, coming here to Kansas City to get to experience what we have to offer? And she said, look, I'm sorry we don't have beaches or mountains or anything like that, but we have some great soccer, we have great people, and we have a great stadium here. So certainly the soccer capital of America, now becoming, in my opinion, one of the soccer capitals of the world. Pretty cool that we are getting this exposure right here in KC.
And I think we need to remember that the most popular soccer team in the United States, and this is not close, this has been going on for 25 years, okay? The most excited followed soccer team in the United States since 1999 and 2000 has been the Women's World Cup team. Yep. The women's national team, the U.S. women's national team, is the best known and most rooted for soccer team in the United States. Are they the same as when, a superstar from overseas comes over and can draw 70,000 Arrowhead? That's a little different situation when you have arguably the greatest player in the history of soccer coming into town. But in terms of teams, they have the highest television ratings. They draw the biggest crowds in person. This league, this NWSL league, is built by spreading them out. There was an argument that our national team should play out of Colorado Springs as the national team, so they play together all the time. And then teams could loan them players to join up, and so we could see if our player was good enough to play on the U.S. national team. And they said, no, we want the stars of the Olympics, the stars of the World Cups. We want them spread out across the United States and helping all the cities sell soccer. And I know, Marleah, you've covered the women's game here in Kansas City. I've covered it for years. When there is a U.S. World Cup player coming in, people come out, and they may be rooting for Kansas City for the Current. And before the Current, they might have been rooting for the Kansas City team that we had before. But they were also rooting for that player who came in, Mia Hamm when she came in, some of those types of players. So let's understand, the United States is ahead of the world when it comes to women's soccer because we've been following our women's World Cup team for so many years.
Yeah, it's a great perspective. I remember one of my favorite quotes from when the stadium was open was Vlatko saying, look, a decade ago we were playing at high schools and the halftime team meeting was just kind of over to the side somewhere, gathered in a field or something. To see the progress that has happened so quickly really is incredible. Neal, want to move along to the second place you wore today, Chiefs training camp, second to last day of camp today. Things are really moving quickly now. So we got second of 3 preseason games on Saturday. Chiefs host the Lions. Then a week from this Thursday, we'll host the Bears. And then roster cuts are less than 2 weeks away now, 13 days. August 27th, this is going to go down. Let's start, before we get to the roster kind of ins and outs, let's start with camp today. What is it like kind of in the final days here? Do you think players are itching to get home, stop sleeping in the dorm beds, or do you think they're still... I would be, is why I ask.
I don't think it's the dorm beds as much as it is just wanting to get back to their lives.
Yeah.
A lot of them are married. Many of them have children. They've been up here for a while. I don't know how many players, when you talk to them, a couple of guys that you talk to them, a couple of the coaches, some of the people I get a chance to talk to before, and I'm like, hey, what do you think? We're ready to go home. I think they are ready to go home. They've gotten a reprieve the last couple of days because it's been cool. It was like 68 degrees today at camp. You came up yesterday. I don't know what it was. Probably pretty cool then as well. And then on Monday it was really cool. So we haven't had the 98 degrees or 100 degrees like we had earlier in the camp, which was a real scorcher. I just think these guys are ready. Remember, this is a veteran team that's won back-to-back Super Bowls and played in 4 Super Bowls over the last, 5 or 6 years. They know what is ahead, and they understand this is a difficult time you have to get through to get to the next step, which is refining the roster and getting ready for that first game. They have spent so much time this week working on the Baltimore Ravens offense. They bring Ian Book, their 4th-string quarterback, in along with a bunch of 3rd and 4th-string players, and they're running all this inside power stuff where the quarterback starts to run the option, goes outside and he hands it off to a running back or a wide receiver going the other way, or a running back who's going to cut it upfield. That's straight out of the Baltimore Ravens playbook. They are doing things at camp to prepare them both for the Ravens and for the other teams on their schedule. The teams, all of them, they respect everybody, but they spend a lot of time at camp. They don't tell the players that's what it's for, but they're like, hey, we're going to go in this defense. This is our option defense, so let's get ready for that, or whatever. They've spent a lot of time doing that. I think the players, coaches, everybody understands, for the most part, the roster is in place. You and I have talked about it. The only things that can change things are injuries. Hollywood Brown's injury will shuffle the lineup a little bit at the receiver position. Getting Kadarius Toney back will affect that position as well. But other than that, I think the coaches pretty much know everybody who's on the team except for maybe 5 or 6 people who are fighting for 2 or 3 spots.
Yeah, want to jump to roster in a second. First, though, we heard from Dave Toub today for the first time since Saturday's preseason game, and a number of kind of mistakes from the special teams unit. Obviously, the 74-yard return, and then, the McCall Hardman, Deneric Prince kind of kerfuffle that happened that resulted in the safety. Where is your concern level on kind of the new kickoff rule and the confusion we saw, on the first weekend of NFL football, kind of the situations it created? Or do you think, that's what these games are for, is to get the kinks out?
That's exactly what they're for. It really is. I asked him if a couple of days ago, I said, so how was your plane flight back? Did your head explode? He goes, Neal, it's the first preseason game.
Yeah.
It's the first preseason game. That's why you have preseason games. I think we talked about it, or maybe, I don't know if that was you and me or me and Jared, the fact that they will kick the ball differently than they did. They don't want to show anything. So Butker is going to kick low line drive scutters. They can do the same thing if he's healthy with the rugby player who kicked in rugby, by the way, Reese Zammit. So when he kicks off, they're just throwing up these lollipops. It's like Nolan Ryan throwing the ball like this, like softball, understanding in a game he's going to throw the real stuff. And also, you and I have talked about this, Justin Reed can kick. He can kick knuckleballs, and then he's a safety back there. When he's healthy, he's back there playing safety. You don't have a rugby player back there playing safety. You don't have a kicker. The highest price kicker in the NFL, by the way. You don't have him back there playing safety. The regular season will be an entirely different proposition. And look, what they don't want to have happen is that they just start powering the ball out of the end zone and give it to them at the 30. And that could happen, because they may say, this is too squirrely, there's too many weird returns, the rules are too weird, nobody move, Butker, kick it to the 3rd row. And if that happens, then the NFL's failed. But one thing that I asked Dave Toub today, I said, look, you guys met on Monday via conference call. What's the rules committee? What are you guys thinking? He said, they said we all need to get on the same page. The refs didn't even know the rules. Yeah. Okay? The players aren't sure of the rules, clearly. Dave Toub said, we've gone through this. Everything has to be returned, but it's easy to say that when you're on the sideline. When a kid is back there returning and he's never seen these plays at full speed, Deneric Prince, and you don't catch it, because what have you been taught? If it goes in the end zone, it's dead. Well, clearly it's not dead. And so he said, we'll be okay. And this was the quote, and this is not a guy who brags, okay? He's a realist. He's been around the league for a long time. And Dave Toub said today, I think we're ahead of the curve. I think we'll be okay. If they aren't, and they lose a game or give up touchdowns the first month of the season, then we can all the people on Sports Talk Radio and people like you and Jared who just love to attack people, then you'll be able to go after them and say they failed. But I take him at where he is. But I will say this, on Monday, who do you think I zoomed in on pre-practice? Dave Tobe. Who comes out? Andy Reid. And they always talk because Dave Tobe's the assistant head coach along with being the special teams coach. So he and Andy talk every day. This was not a talk. It looked like you and your dad after you made all C's your sophomore year of high school. It's like, what are you doing, Marleah? And Dave Tobe's like, well, the ball went in the end zone, it came out, so the referee, you could just see it playing out where they were talking. They weren't mad. Nobody was mad, but there was a little more intensity than usual. But look, this is not a second-year coach coaching special teams. This is Dave Tobe. There's one returner in the Pro Football Hall of Fame for returning, Devin Hester, who just went in. Guess who he played for? This guy, Dave Tobe. Dave Tobe knows how to coach, and I trust that he'll get it right. But I'm telling you, everyone says, poor Reese Zammit, he's going to have to learn. Guess what? They all have to learn. He knows just as much about the kickoffs as anybody because none of us have seen anything like this.
Yeah, I think it was actually advantageous to happen at this part of the year because you'd rather give up 2 meaningless points in the preseason than had this exact situation happened during the season when games are decided by such a thin margin of error. So now the next time this happens, I'm sure they'll say, hey, we've seen this before and we're not going to let this happen again. Neal, want to move on real fast.
Let me ask you a question.
Yep.
Did you, after you made straight C's, did you ever have bad grades again?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question.
I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
I don't even know how
you
to
had
answer
great grades. You were offered spots in Ivy League schools. I'm teasing her. She's unlike me, unlike Kenny Price, our photographer.
Hi, Kenny.
You actually graduated, and Kenny and I, we really didn't.
Okay, moving on to the 53-man roster deadline, 13 days away now. Neal, you mentioned that you think, which I would agree with, these rosters are essentially decided. Maybe there's a couple guys on the bubble. Are there any surprises you were expecting? I say surprises as like Chiefs Kingdom being like, oh my gosh, I thought that guy was gonna make the team. Or do you think, it's gonna kind of go as planned with the returners making spots?
Andy Reid is not a wild and crazy guy. I think, there's a guy like Kadarius Toney. I think a lot of us wonder, okay, they owe him $2.5 million. So if you cut him, that's dead cap. That's $2.5 million that's going unspent and nobody's getting it. But he's not shown me a lot. I asked the wide receiver coach today about him. He's a guy that I think could be close. I don't know. At some point, you got to. Okay, he had that great Super Bowl punt return. We know he's a great runner. We know he's capable of catching the ball, but I don't know that they really feel like he's all in mentally. I don't know that. I get that just from things that have happened on the practice field, not just this year, but last year as well. That's a possibility. I could be all wet. His talent is so good when he's on that maybe they know he's on the team. But I do think that there are some jobs up for grabs. It was really interesting. Okay, this is camp number 31 for me. And before that, I was covering the Dallas Cowboys. So I've covered these training camps for a long time. And today, Mark Paulos, who was with me up there, who's helping us out in sports right now, and he's done sports, grew up in the Kansas City area, big Chiefs fan. He's going nuts afterwards. Wow, the cut down's coming. I go, dude, it's 13 days away. In 13 days, you could have 5 injuries, in these games, or you could have a guy have a monster game. It's too early. It's just too early. It's like trying to predict a winner in the presidential election when it's August. There's a lot of campaigning to go. Well, guess what? In 13 days is a long time in football when you've got 2 preseason games. People can still save their jobs. People can lose their jobs. Injuries could happen. Yeah. So, Marleah, I'm not one of those people who says, well, I think it's going to be 7 wide receivers for sure. Well, you and I were talking about it, and I told you back a week ago or a week and a half ago, someone's going to get hurt sooner or later. Yeah. Someone's going to get hurt. Well, I didn't know it was going to be Hollywood Brown, but you figure someone's going to get hurt, pull a muscle, or something's going to happen, and so that's going to reshuffle it. It's hard to predict what's going to happen. I will say this. I really think they like Kingsley at left tackle. I think he's the guy. If he doesn't get hurt, he's going to be the starter for the Chiefs. I think they feel like he's not 100%. We've heard it from everybody. No, he's not where he's going to be, but my goodness, he's physical and he's sane and asking the right things and he's improving himself. I think 2 of their rookie offensive linemen, they want to keep at least one of them on the practice squad. I think one's going to be there. Probably Norzad's going to be on the squad. I think that, Darius McIntyre, the right tackle from TCU, who had that horrific knee injury 2 years ago and has spent about a year and a half trying to come back from it, I think he's a guy that could lose his job. He's got to show something. They love his size, they love his potential, but at some point, you've got to do more. That's one reason why they've had him playing at the guard position. So I think there are a lot of guys in the mix. They're watching all of them. I think these last 2 preseason games will be very important for the bottom of the roster. I really do. There are a couple of guys that are wide receivers I don't think are going to make the team, but I think the Chiefs like them, right? So I think Justin Ross is a guy. They like his physicality at the point of catching the ball, and he's been around. So, and remember, he was on the practice squad last year for most of the time. So that means he's getting snaps every week. Maybe on the scout team, but they're seeing him every week. So there are some guys I think that we might not be thinking about who could end up on the practice squad even if they get let go from the big roster.
Yeah, well, and as you mentioned, guys can really increase their stock on Saturday. I think about Carson Steele, the hero of last week. Who knows if he's going to make the roster. It's a pretty deep position group he's fighting with unless they move him over to fullback if Andy Reid wants to keep a fullback this year. But, Carson Steele had the game of his life, and he caught everyone's notice. So, Neal, okay, we could talk about this. Do you have something else?
Right.
Okay, I was going to say we could talk about this for the next 2 hours.
With you. I think Steele is on the team as of today based on what he's done. Not just, Andy Reid said it a million times, you guys see the games. We grade and judge every single practice rep with the dummies and the pads. We're hitting the pads with the sled, and we judge them when they're blocking other people. I think based on all of that, he's on the team. I think Deneric Prince is a guy, they like him. They like his size. They like how hard he runs. But is he going to beat out Clyde Edwards-Helaire? I mean, they trust Helaire. Hilaire's played in major games, and he's got stomach problems, and they know that. They're recurrent. It causes him to miss training camp at times, practices during the regular season, not because he has a choice. It's a chronic illness. I think Edwards-Helaire is a guy that if he missed 3 or 4 weeks of practice, he could get passed on the chart. But I think otherwise, I think that I think they love the thought of having a big guy like Steele in there. Great special teams player, flat out is a great pass blocker. He could be a third down back. If they choose to go with 2 running backs and keep one in to block and one to release into the pattern, he's a guy that could do that because he's such a good blocker. And and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a good blocker as well. He's developed into a good blocker. That's an area where, Pacheco has never been known as a great blocker. He's not bad, but he's sort of a liability. So if you blitz and he has to pick somebody up, there have been all too many times he hasn't been able to do it. So there are a lot of things that go into these decisions, and special teams will play a big part of that.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned special teams being a big factor with Hollywood Brown potentially missing week 1. We don't have an exact timeline yet, but it's looking more and more that way every time we get an update. It's not cut and dry like just the wide receiver room. Kadarius Toney can swing. You have a number of guys who can kind of play both positions. We don't know the future of Rashee Rice's situation. So there's just so many variables, it's impossible to predict. But we are getting closer, which is good news. Neal, we're running out of time here, so I want to get to our last topic here. Royals picking up a big win today, 4-1 over the Twins. They avoid the sweep. They lost the last 2, and I think they were outscored like 21-6 in those last 2 games. So it was nice to leave Minnesota with a win. You got a 1.5 game lead over the Red Sox in the wild card race. Man, it just feels like there's no room for error right now with how close this has been with the Royals trying to secure that final spot in the wild card race. And we're getting down the stretch here.
Yeah, it's too soon, though, to look at the standings, I think. I think you just got to keep your head down and play.
Yeah.
It's like, Marleah, you played college basketball, Division I college basketball. You're down 15 points in the second half. At some point, you take your eye off the scoreboard, put your head down, and try to play better and just climb your way back. There are no 18-point deals. Well, the Royals, it's too early to look at the standings too much, and they need to play better. I thought it's interesting. they've only been swept one time this year.
Yeah.
I think they now are they've won 9 out of 10 games. The final game of a series, when if they lose, they're swept. They've won 9 of the 10. And I think that says something about them. I mean, today they had the edge of pitching because Minnesota was starting a bad pitcher. But yesterday, the Royals should have had the edge of pitching, and they got bombed. So you can't go by that all the time. But I thought they got a great game from their starting pitcher, who really came out. I think he struck out 10 people, had 1 walk, something like that.
17th quality.
And he got into the 7th. His MO has been that he can strike a lot of people out, but he throws too many pitches. He cannot get through 5 1/3, 5 2/3 innings. Well, he has the last couple of games, and I think that's a good sign for the Royals. Nice win for them, but as you said, it's not over. They got to keep playing good baseball every single day. Yeah,
you mentioned the college basketball thing. We treated it 4 minutes at a time, so we just had to win this next 4 minutes. Like, that was the only time period we were looking at. Ended up going to 5 minutes when we switched to quarters in women's basketball. All that to say, that is enough for today. Neal, we know you got a live shot coming up at 6 o'clock, so we will check back in with you over on KCTV5. For that, we'll see you later. Have fun out there.
You bet.